Hello.
Hello. Hi there.
You hear me, yeah?
I can hear you.
Good. We're all working, are we? Jeez, I'm very bright. Oh.
I'm looking at this notification for allow to observe your screen. Did you get that notification?
I don't think I did. Maybe I got the notifications for putting on the camera and the phone and stuff like that, you know, but...
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
How are you doing? All right.
How are things?
All good.
Ah, yeah.
Must be
Very
doing something right
monochrome. All good?
Yeah.
How are all you guys doing anyway?
Grand. It's
I'm the only one with a beard, am I?
no. I'm already way ahead of you, man. It's late in the. I have to say, it's late in the evening.
Oh, it is. Ah,
For
sure.
this. But yeah, all grand. Yeah.
Did you catch any of the other events they had on earlier?
Just a little bit of a couple of things. I saw that guy Bursky, I think is to say his name, a cinematographer.
Mm-hmm.
I know has worked on some things that I've had to work on, but Jesus, it's amazing the stuff that he does. It's extraordinary. Like there was one thing was a film about Patrick Kavanagh, basically for the Patrick Kavanagh Centre. They've made this Patrick Kavanagh visit in Monaghan, and so they had a bunch of his poems with visuals put to it. So they just had the poems, and they were just kind of left on devices to come up with nice visuals to put to that, and it just looked so good. Like they had the one that probably struck me most was Raglan Road. I actually used to live on Raglan Road for a while. I used to rent on Raglan Road. Hey Pat, how you doing?
Can you hear me, gents?
Yes.
Jesus, I was having a mare of a time getting in. Sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan.
No, you're grand. But they so obviously what they did was they went down to Raglan Road and they filmed of an autumn day as the song or as the poem goes. But it just looked so amazing. Jesus Christ. It was raining on the day and the autumn leaves are falling off the trees. And they had an actor playing a young Patrick Kavanagh. He's looking at this raven-haired beauty as she walks down Raglan Road. But it just looked. I said, you know the way like people often go on about, I don't know how you come up with music and stuff like that. They think next to go. So, hey, Natasha, how
are you doing?
And they go, I don't know how you come up with music or something like that. But I really, really appreciate. I think, that there's not in a million years. If you sent me up to Raglan Road with a camera, would I be able to, or lights, would I be able to come up with anything like what they came back with? It's just beautiful. So yeah, I saw he was talking there. I think maybe he got awarded recently or something. And that's why he was on one of the earlier talks. But fabulous work that he does. Yeah.
It's funny the way we take that for granted in music, don't we? Though, like we just know how to do all the things. You kind of forget, because like my partner is a photographer, and she does that thing where she just inadvertently takes a photo, and you're like, why is that so good looking? Like you can't reason it out. You're just like, God damn it. I assume it's the same when someone listens to it, put together a piece of music, like that's just witchcraft.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Ray.
Hello, how is everyone?
Hey.
Good.
Hey, Ray.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for jumping on tonight.
Thank you.
You're very good for taking your time to come on. They're just finishing up the previous session there with Irish Equity. Everything seems to have taken a little staggered delay now, unfortunately. if you guys are okay for a little bit. There is a handful of people in the room here now at the minute. Maybe if you want to ask some specific questions or something that they can type in the chat, perhaps.
Hello, handful of people.
Yeah, maybe if like what sort of background they have regarding music or composing, things like that. And then I'll be jumping back and forth anyway with the other group. I've just notified Paul there; he's hosting the other one. There's Kevin. Hi, Kevin. So they'll be wrapping up shortly anyway. So maybe another 5-10 minutes if that's okay with you guys.
That's fine.
Excellent, good stuff. Cool. I'll be jumping in and back. Is there anybody else due on this session, or do we have everybody now?
No, unless Paul decides to grace us with his pretty head, I think we're probably okay.
Do you really want to see his head? I see it enough. Yeah, he will be joining shortly. Let me just check this here.
Is there a way for us to know, right? I mean, we'll see the numbers, I assume, but like, do you want to give me a little nod when we're kicking off proper, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll do. Well, we can do a quick introduction or something, or each of you can do a quick introduction. But yeah, I think if you're okay with the slight delay, and sincere apologies for that. Like we do try to keep things on track, but the conversations are good, which is a good thing as well. But I'm very aware you're all of your times as well. But they're enjoying the other conversations, which is nice. But we'll slowly get that wrapped up and then start sending everybody over to this session here. So there's Giles and Patrick as well. Cool. So I'll leave you guys to maybe ask a few questions to the people in like the attendees, the audience there. That would be awesome. And I'll jump back and forth, and I'll be back in a minute.
Perfect. Sound right.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to give you an FYI, folks, I have little notes on you here to embarrass you with. So you don't have to read out your own bios, but I'll read them out. Everyone's favorite. I'll just introduce you one at a time, and we can have a chat. And I have a couple of topics, but I know it's meant to be fairly informal, and a fairly roundtable kind of discussion. So I'm happy to. I know it's dangerous. They've given 4 composers the opportunity to just speak at length. They don't know what they've done, but I'm happy enough for us to kind of improv it a little bit that way. For the folks that are already in, if you have any questions, just to give a brief little, I'm going to end up repeating myself, so I won't talk about it too much. But we're all members of the Screen Composers Guild of Ireland. My name is Patrick O'Connor. I'm a composer as well, but for the most part, I'm just going to be shutting up and letting these 4 very talented folks talk to you. The Guild is kind of effectively the representative body for Irish composers and non-Irish composers, people working in Ireland generally. It serves as an advocacy group, it's a training group, it's everything. It's fantastic. We're all fortunate enough to be full members, and we're all jobbing film composers, media composers, whatever kind of label you want to put on it. It's increasingly hard to put a label on what composers do for media at this point anyway, because it's so wide ranging. But if you have any questions about music for film, music for TV, games, any of that stuff, fire them into the chat, especially if you have any really nitty-gritty questions, because as I said, composers love getting into that stuff. And for the most part, then it'll just be kind of a chat. We'll be talking about topics that we feel are kind of relevant to the experience of a composer in Ireland today, but also I think a little bit more leaning towards the experience of a filmmaker in terms of working with composers. Because we know that the vast majority of the attendees are going to be filmmakers themselves, as opposed to just standard kind of pen and paper composers. So we're going to try and keep things out of the realm of nitty-gritty music-y stuff and more nitty-gritty filmmaking-y stuff, if that makes sense. So as I said, anything that pops up, fire it into the chat, and we'll do our very best to answer. Folks, how are you this evening?
Good. It's a beautiful evening, so
it is.
And,
Kevin, I always admire whenever we do the guild meetings and you have that lovely backdrop. I'm always fierce jealous. I'm like a little keystroke away from Tome, every time I see it, I'm like, God damn.
Stay away. I haven't actually brought any gear in ages, which is pretty good.
Is that like a badge of honor? You're like, yeah, I did it. I kicked it.
I've just kind of approached my I'm pretty happy with everything at the moment, Until of course I wake up one morning and sort of go, actually,
gear acquisition syndrome. It's dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Jonathan, how are you doing? I made a joke before in a guild meeting about how I'm convinced you live in that room.
Yeah.
because you actually you frame everything perfectly, so it's the exact same every time. You're like, I'm still here 9 months later.
No, I do. I just lay down underneath the table and just
He's
eat
a
a
little
few.
drawer. A little drawer. He pull
Yeah,
out.
just nibble a few Cheerios and Jameson, and that keeps me going to the next day, and then I'm ready for more.
Giles, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. Very good.
You have a very I like your just grown up backdrop. It's
Yeah.
there's not an instrument to be found.
I kind of regret now not bringing an instrument because we could have a little jam. Like I should have done
Sprawling everywhere. Natasha, how are you doing?
Hello there. I'm great. I was just saying, thinking I turned my microphone off because my poor laptop, the fan was spinning, so I don't want to have the fan noise. I'm not actually in Dublin. I'm in County Monaghan, so I'm on my laptop. So
What brings you to Monaghan?
Not my. I'm at the Tyrone Guthrie Centre. I don't know, the artist's residency.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if people know about that. It's basically a space where you can just go for, I think the minimum is a week up to about a month or two just to write and be on your own. It's lovely. It's an amazing space. So I've got my gear here, except obviously not my computer with the proper webcam.
Yeah, it's the thing the one instrument we all hate using, but have to use.
Yeah.
What instrument do you play? The big heavy iMac, that one.
That one, exactly. Yeah, the MIDI keyboard.
Yeah, I recently had to explain to someone who I sold an obsolete, I wasn't using it. It was an 88 key MIDI controller that I just replaced with a workstation and had to sell it on Dundee. And I had to explain to the gentleman who'd come with his partner. He was trying his best to sort of how would you put it? He was trying to sort of protect her buying integrity. She knew absolutely what she was doing because of course she did. She knew that it was a MIDI controller. It doesn't make sounds. But I had to explain to the man that it didn't use bus power. It didn't need a power cable. It's like, where's the power cable? It's like, it doesn't need a power cable. It's all right. Just everyone's like, what do you play? I'm like, this big keyboard. It doesn't make any noise. Don't worry about it. Don't ask. Yeah. How's everyone doing in terms of, have you been pure utter swamped over the course of COVID with work? Have you been intermittent? Have you been enjoying possibly not gigging, or have you been missing gigging?
I was a bit unfortunate at the start of lockdown because a lot of the projects I'd been sort of scheduled to go on were sort of just cancelled or just pulled immediately. There was even one where I think they were on the second last day of shooting, and then it was gone. And then I think there was a main character in it who was about 7, and then was suddenly 9 by the time they got back to doing the shoot again. That was all over the shop, but had a good few of them. But I still had a few sort of advertising stuff coming in. But I also took the opportunity to do the games course with Griffith College, and which was run from home, which was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great. It was good to just have that opportunity to do that, and also there was a few things taken in, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of it's a pattern for everyone, isn't it? Over the lockdown, has been quietly grateful for the ability to do that one thing that we could never carve out enough time to do. I told myself I'd learn Cubase. I didn't learn Cubase, but I lied to myself and said I would. But it's good to hear that people are. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was forced to learn Pro Tools, so
Yeah, that's me. I learned Pro Tools in college, and by gar, I'm sticking with it if it kills me. Giles, Jonathan, and Natasha, any lockdown projects?
Well, I had a kind of a surprising amount of composing stuff in the lockdown, oddly, just because I think some of the animation people really said, okay, well, we can still have this happen. We're all at home. We can still all do our bits of the project at home. And so we did, and there were we did 2 series of the show, Pins and Netties, and there was a couple of these exhibition projects. There's actually one in County Monaghan. Natasha, if you're looking for something to do, there's there's that Patrick Kavanagh thing up in County Monaghan I was just referring to earlier. And then I did quite a lot. I have a band, and we do the well. It's when I say we, it's me really doing it. I have this idea that I love to have a chronology, an album chronology. It's the one thing that I kind of am jealous of other musicians having from years back, is having a chronology of albums. Maybe they start in the 60s or 70s, and they have a chronology of albums going through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I kind of said, I wish I had that, been a musician through those times and releasing different things. So I decided I was going to write albums as if I was a musician back in those times and release them randomly. So I released a 1975 album, a 1978 album, and over the course of the lockdown, I came up with a 1982 album and a 1972 album. And so all the musicians in the band have been recording these albums. So hopefully we'll throw them out next year.
You shouldn't have said that. You said that here. You should have just gotten someone to mock you up a really get a good vinyl cover, beat the absolute hell out of it, and then just start dropping it into golden discs. I found these.
This is a classic, man.
Yeah, it's been locked in a vault for decades.
Yeah, totally. Well, this definitely we're going to make vinyls of these next bunch. We did CDs of the previous ones, but that I just love the kind of personal challenge of saying, okay, what if you had to only if you try and imagine you're in 1972 and you're going to write music and you can't be anachronistic. You have to write music that can only have been done in 1972, and you only have the instruments and the history of rock and music before that, and try and write songs. And so that was kind of like my own little crossword puzzle.
Yeah,
for the lockdown.
You can't be Marty McFly playing Van Halen in the 50s.
No, exactly. No, you have to be true to the time.
Yeah, I assume everyone here would be similar to me and would love the restriction of that. That's something I find incredibly challenging at this point. The advent of sample libraries has been fantastic, but I wish in a way we didn't have them, because then I think everyone would sound a little bit different, and then there wouldn't be as much creative paralysis when we're doing these things either. You're like, which Spitfire audio flautando sample will I use this time? So yeah, I can certainly empathize with that. I'm keeping an eye here. We still have the same 11 that we have. Hello, Aidan O'Callaghan. I got a hello out of you. Good evening. As I said, folks, if there's anyone in the chat, fire in some questions if there are any at all for nerdy composer talk, nerdy filmmaker talk that's composer adjacent. How are you, Ray?
Hello, how are you? I just I would have sent you a message there. You guys were just chatting away and it was all good. It was quite interesting. So I think if you want to start, there's a couple of people slowly coming into this room, but the Irish Equity, they're getting into some very interesting stuff there. So we'll probably leave them to it. Paul is hosting that, as you know, so they'll probably continue for another little bit, probably not longer than 10 minutes. But if you guys want to just get started, Patrick, I know you've got questions lined up and you've got lots of stuff there. So
we're musicians. We'll off the cuff, improv, all that stuff.
Excellent. That's generally how we do it at FNI anyway. It's just what are we doing today? Oh yeah. Cool, brilliant. Well, thanks again everybody for joining us, and especially Patrick for hosting this event. And I look forward to hearing in the background here. Give us a shout if you need anything.
Cheers, Ray.
Thanks.
Folks, if any of you have had to hear me say this already, I sincerely apologize, but I'll say it again. I teach, so I'm used to repeating myself. We're all, myself and my 4 extremely talented fellow composers here, are members of the Screen Composers Guild of Ireland. It's the representative body for composers in Ireland and Irish-based composers. It functions as much as a directory, an advocacy group, a source of really indispensable industry training. It's the works, and we're really fortunate to have it because plenty of countries don't have a composers guild. I'm joined by, as I said, 4 extremely It's a bit daunting, lads. Your bios are, when I read them all out, I'm like, God, they've done an awful lot of things. It was very hard to condense these, so I'm going to read them out and embarrass you all one at a time. So Natasha, I have you here first. So Natasha's an LA and Dublin-based composer whose music many of you will have heard in the 2020 documentary The Hunger, the one narrated by Liam Neeson. She's a multi-award winning composer, and she's, like actually everyone kind of here on the call, has worked in a whole different range of, I guess you'd call them genres and even contexts, from ranging from like working as a film composer, curating concerts, and she's also worked in LA with the likes of Gary Scheinman and Christopher Young, who are like two really prolific composers whom I'm a big fan of. So welcome, Natasha. How are you this evening?
I'm well, thank you. And again, I'll apologize for the sound on my laptop. I'll just talk really loud. I'm really well. Thank you for that great introduction. That's very kind of you.
Paul has interrupted you, Natasha. Pay no attention to
Natasha. Hi, Jonathan. How you doing? Kevin, Giles. Sorry, I got. I'm room hopping just to pop in and say hello and thanks so much for this. And Kevin, you win in terms of the backdrop, unless that's
we've already done. We've had it out. You're relitigating the past now, Paul. He's already won.
So listen, I just wanted to just step in. I'll come back a little bit later and just thank everybody for their time. I personally, I'm really curious to kind of pull the curtain, see what's happening behind the curtain, you know, from a composer's point of view and from a sound and film and television point of view, just to see, number one, to find out about you guys, but also to kind of get some idea of the landscape of what you guys are dealing with. Some of you are more experienced than others, so maybe to hear from the likes of Giles, who's been around for a while, and Jonathan as well. And think of this video as a video that will be available for people in the near future who will gain some understanding of what it is that you do, how the relationships that you develop work with filmmakers and your place within the industry. So it's very much a tool for people to kind of find out, okay, well, I would like to do that. You know, I'm a talented musician or X, Y, and Z, and this is how that works. That's what their job entails, and this is what the industry is like, good and bad, you know. And also just very quickly thank you and say namaste and all of those lovely things. And I have to nip back and just finish off Irish Equity. But thanks so much for your time, and I'll check back in with you in a few minutes.
Cheers, Paul.
Thanks, guys.
Right, Kevin, you're next up on the block for me embarrassing you. Sorry now. Folks, my colleagues here are so prolific that I have a load of notes over here on a different monitor, and I'm trying to make it sound like they're not notes, but I'm just going to read them like they're notes. So Kevin has worked on a broad range of projects that range from advertising to video games to film scoring to commission contemporary music. You've played in Carnegie Hall, Kevin, am I correct?
Yeah. I played there, I think it was 2019, March 2019. I remember thinking if it had been a year later, COVID would have ended it. Like, you know.
So there you go, written in the stars. You've worked for the likes of Disney Interactive, BBC, RTE, Setanta Sports, Electric Ireland, Dulux. I could go on like this for a while. And some of your recent work is the upcoming Kim Barty documentary, John Connor's Acting Academy, for RTE. And you have worked, or are you still working on an end credit song with Sinead O'Connor for an upcoming production? Yeah,
we just finished working on the track.
How was that?
It was interesting.
Were those massive inverted commas, Kevin?
No, actually, you know what? It was kind of delicate but interesting, and it worked really well. And you had to have your wits about you, all right. But it turned out great. The tune turned out amazing, so it's really good, you know. So hopefully we'll be able to hear more about that. I think it's kind of, I don't think there's anything happening with it for the next couple of months anyway, so I don't really know what.
Those NDAs are great fun, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Folks, then we have Jonathan Casey here. Jonathan scored animation projects for the likes of Disney, CBBC, and RTE, and he's had his music performed, much like the rest of everybody else here. His music has been performed by orchestras worldwide, and he's lectured in animation or scoring for animation for Pulse Academy. Some of his recent work includes Hillwalkers, Ghost Dog, it's an animation coming to RTE at Halloween, and Pins and Nettie's Daily Madness animated series. That's for 2021. Is it gone already, Jonathan, or is it coming up?
No, there's more again. Yeah.
You're still stuck in that studio.
There's there's a third bunch for coming along. Yeah.
And then finally, certainly last but not least, we have Giles Packham, and Giles is like scored a frankly startling amount of documentaries, including The Man Who Wanted to Fly, RT's 1916 documentary Seven Women, multiple Smithsonian Network documentary series, and he scored numerous animation series, including the 40-part series Jessie and Nessie and a 26-part series Philly Fantasia in 2020 alone. I'm quite impressed by that. It's like you're doing the same thing Jonathan is doing, but you don't seem to be living in the studio, which is
Well, yeah.
half the battle, I think. So yeah, folks, I just wanted to kind of, that's me shutting up now. I won't embarrass you more, but I wanted to kind of kick the ball into the court about a couple of things that, like, I mean, what Paul is saying is kind of valid to this. A lot of the people watching won't be film composers. They won't be people that have potentially ever worked with composers. I mean, that was certainly my experience. I did the speed networking thing that's to follow later this evening before, and it would surprise me how many people I spoke to. I mean, as we all know, people use placed music. They use royalty-free music an awful lot. And it ends up being the case where a lot of people just never engage with the composer. So I'd be curious for each of you to maybe speak a little bit about what you feel a composer contributes to a project. Not even necessarily just on the musical level, but on an overall level. If you could speak a little bit to that in terms of, say, what a composer brings versus, say, finding a royalty-free piece, finding a placed tune, what have you. I don't know if there's a raise hand function in this, so just have at it, I'd say. This is the great bit, the tumbleweed, as no one knows. Everyone's like,
well, I would say continuity is from a filmmaker's point of view. That's probably an integral thing that they're going to from hiring a composer, as opposed to plucking bits of music out of everywhere and all that sort of stuff. I also think that there's continuity, but also a lot of some filmmakers aren't aware that, like, you know, there's a lot of scope there's a lot of conversation that can be had to, you know, completely, you know, get the music and get everything to really suit the project that they're actually putting together. And so, yeah, it gives continuity, also adds tremendous value as well to their project.
Yeah, I certainly think we can all agree with that.
I was going to say, like, you know, like, when you're scoring a project, there might be some sort of a general reference that someone might have, but in it, like, the actual music doesn't work in the context of the film, but the reference works. And then for the composer, that's a very good language to translate into, even if it's down to the instrumentation or the feel or that type of thing. It's a great way to get started anyway with composing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kevin's point about continuity as well is like, and actually, Giles, that brings me to a point that I'd like us to discuss later. But that point about the continuity, and I think it leads me to something that if unless Jonathan and Natasha have thoughts about this, I'd be curious to hear everyone's thoughts about. Because one of my next topics was going to be, and I think it's again something that's a little bit ambiguous. It changes for everyone. Is kind of at what point in a production to bring a composer on board. I think we all have some kind of sense of what it is the composers do, but I think that people disregard just how important it can be to be very careful about when you bring in a composer and how much that can lend to the project.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think I can answer that one. Yeah, I think when to bring someone in, you can bring a composer in anytime, really. Like currently I'm working on something that actually I'm looking at the script at draft level. It's still draft level, so it's really, really, really early. And it's great because, I mean, I'm enjoying it because it's allowing me time to write things and really think about it. I think that's what all composers would say, is time is just such an issue. It's really, really crunchy. So I think bringing a composer on earlier is great, just because we can bounce ideas a lot more rather than having that really intense post-production time to create something that's unique. So, I mean, definitely stress also, though, can actually bring great ideas. I think sometimes when you've got a deadline and you've only got a few weeks, that can work as well. So I suppose try and bring on a composer early on. But what I would say is that, personally, this is me, I don't know how the other composers feel. I don't really I don't write I don't like to write things at script stage, as in like complete pieces. I like to wait till I see a rough cut, because what I've noticed is that, you know, I might have ideas in my head at the script stage, but then when you actually see the visuals, it's completely different, and so then it would change the way I would write. So that's something to think about as a filmmaker, maybe to give the composer some early rough cuts, just to get an idea of what the narrative is like, the flow, the tempo of the images as well.
Yeah, like I just I'd agree. I mean, I think at any point having the composer in early is great. I mean, there's the Morricone, Sergio Leone example, and Morricone writing the music, you know, on the script level and then playing it on the set. And I know there was a time where I got a script for a short film, and I thought I found the script quite sort of moving, and I said, well, I'll do a little sort of audio mood board or something like that. I'll kind of just send you something. And I came up with a couple of pieces from the script, and they really liked them, but they also said, well, that kind of actually directs us as to what we want to shoot now, because the music is it has a sort of a lush emotive quality. Actually, I think I can shoot this in a take a richer tone with the visuals, because we have music like that. I could shoot like this to go with that. And so actually there was a sort of a symbiosis of just me reacting to I thought I loved the script and the music, and then they shot differently the way they would have done. And then I worked then off that again. So I think there's no harm at all in coming on early, because you never know what sort of language you might develop between each other, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the case where I always find that Morricone one funny, because I think only Ennio Morricone could have gotten away with that. Because I've the exact same experience that Natasha highlighted, where sometimes it is the case for someone, you might come up with the most beautiful suite of music. I know James Newton Howard did it a lot for M. Night Shyamalan's films as well. But I think that speaks to something we might try and touch on, which is that collaborative relationship and how important that can actually be. Because I think we have numerous, I mean, I'm sure 5 nerdy composers, we could all list off numerous examples of scores being rejected where prolific composer meets prolific director and it just doesn't work. But like, I think it would be, I mean, could any of you share your experience in terms of what, I think that's a fantastic one that Jonathan raises, that idea of that chicken and egg kind of thing happening with the, you know, who informs the emotional quality when, that kind of collaborative aspect of it. And I think that's probably something that, again, would be good to touch on in the context of getting on early, is you have more time to build that collaborative relationship. You mightn't be submitting cues that will be nailed down because the film hasn't been shot yet, but I would very much think that would be conducive to a good creative relationship. I really wish I had a good like electric guitar, Ennio Morricone sample now. It's just a big bang. Kevin, you were raring to go.
I've actually forgotten what I was going to say. What was the guts of the question again? Just
in terms of how you feel, I guess, how important it can be to build that collaborative relationship as a part of the job.
No, absolutely. I mean, as everyone said, it's kind of links to what you were saying earlier about when do you want to get involved in a project. Obviously, the earlier you get involved, the more collaborative it has the room to become, you know. And certainly, like when you know, in my own personal experience, you know, getting rough cuts, like really, really rough cuts, and then you kind of come up with a little sort of sketch of an idea, and then the director will come back and go, actually, I'm gonna re-edit this scene, or I'm gonna reshoot that bit, and just to suit this, you know. And it's kind of like, I suppose it's like getting your own temp track onto the edit, you know, which is always kind of like, you know, we're all familiar with, you know, being handed film with a temp track on it. But if you can actually have your own sort of temp track embedded on that film as it's shooting, that's all obviously a big plus, you know. So they don't tend to suffer from demo-itis as much, like, you know, when you're sending them through the stuff, you know. So yeah, collaborative all the way, and establishing a language is also one of the main sort of things between a composer and a director. I think, you know, like we say dark and bright, and you know, it could be a bit brighter there, and they're thinking visually, and we're thinking, you know, it's just that sort of stuff, and listening to directors, and you know, sussing out exactly what it is that they want. And it's fun.
Yeah, you sound like you've hit the gold mine in terms of if you're temping stuff with your own work, Kevin. I'm very jealous of you.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Tasha, go ahead.
I think what Kevin, oh no, I'm saying exactly what Kevin touched on. Like, it's so true. It's like getting to, because you obviously can be two people that don't know each other, and so having the time to spend together and think about ideas, and even get I love the vocabulary, like, because we don't speak the same. You know, when we say something as musicians, we might say something that a filmmaker may not understand. I mean, I have one example. You know, I was doing this cue. It was actually in LA, and the guy was like, "Oh, I love that twang." You know, which for him, twang was a certain sound, but for me, it was like a stringed instrument. So I'm scouring through this cue, looking for what he's talking about, but in the end, it ended up being a brass instrument. So things like that, some simple things like that, what I would say is so important to have a good relationship and to know each other and talk a lot, because that can waste time sometimes. You know, you might be spending a couple of days trying to figure out what they meant. So I think having a good communication really helps with the collaboration.
Giles or Jonathan?
Yes.
Any other contributions before I'm conscious of the chat here? There's questions in it, and I would love to address.
I was just going to add actually that in say in an experience of animation where you sometimes get to see a storyboard, you get to score the storyboard before the action is actually pinned down, but the actors or the VO might be there. It's quite an interesting process, because you have to be able to not only score the scene, but you also have to be able to change it constantly. So there's an awful lot of technical stuff, as well as capturing emotion and capturing story and instrumentation and everything. There's also the added kind of technical issue with that as well, in terms of trying to make it fit and sound musically good, and potentially changes completely at any stage.
That actually raises something I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on. I think would be really beneficial to those that are watching that, again, have never worked with composers or aren't composers themselves. What Giles is talking about, because like I know we could all waffle on it, and I know no one wants to hear me waffle about it, but just in terms of that aspect of how important it is potentially to have that locked image if you're going for something that has that music is really vital in, that music is doing an awful lot of, I don't want to say heavy lifting necessarily, but music is fairly integral, how important it can be for a composer to have a fairly decent representation of the cut, and it's unlikely to change, but it may be a frame or two, but like nothing dramatic, because I think that's something I think a lot of I'd be eager to hear your experiences. I've encountered a lot of directors over the years who don't know actually what happens, what you do, like how it starts from you on the piano or whatever to the end. They just think it happens like that, but they don't understand that you're moving it like this much to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah.
Kevin.
I mean, yeah, you get the listen, we've just cut it's only half a second, you know, and you're going, well, it's scored out for a 60-piece orchestra, you know, and everything has to change and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's having the locked piece is vital, really, for especially when you're coming towards. I mean, you can do all the, as we mentioned earlier on, all the sort of, you know, doing up a little demos with all this sort of stuff. But when it comes down to it, yeah, a couple of seconds here, a couple of seconds there can be trauma.
Hair gone. Jonathan and Giles, I know given all of your work in animation, could you speak to that in terms of like, because I actually have never worked in animation, and I didn't realize that, Giles, that you'd be at a stage where you would be scoring a storyboard essentially.
Well, I suppose when you say storyboard, more like, I suppose it would be, sometimes scenes wouldn't be complete, so there might be green screen or there might be animatic, sometimes depending on the nature of the program. So, I mean, everything is there, but it might say like explosion, but you don't know.
You're not quite sure how long the explosion is or where in frame it is.
That type of thing. So you're kind of working around. I mean, it's both the stages, the composition stage, the sound effects stage, everything happens kind of at the same time. So everyone's moving at the same time. So you are getting constantly updated. You're getting, the latest cut with the latest thing on it. But you might have the final cut for. I mean, the timings won't change, but the final cut will. It could be missing. You'll be missing stuff until the very final cut. So it's always interesting to see what you've done and how it actually translates then to the final cut in those occasions. Sometimes it works out really, surprisingly well, like how it all comes together. And then sometimes you need to make a change, obviously, to kind of get it to work.
I had that actually just today, just the same as what Giles is describing. I worked off an animatic, and so you're just seeing, instead of seeing a moving image, you're just seeing a drawn picture for a few seconds, then another drawn picture, and they're going to put the movement in between those pictures, but you're just working off black and white drawing. And invariably it will change, the timings between those will change. So I had to do exactly what you're describing. You're going to have to compress some things and expand some things, because now there's different breathing areas, But I think there's two things. I mean, technology makes that so much easier now. The way that the stuff that you
don't tell them, Jonathan. Don't tell them. They don't know.
No, I won't say. Well, then it's all personal skill. We just we get out our pencils and paper and we just rewrite it out. But it's a lot easier to work with now. And then, like, I nearly find it fun. Like there was a point where I was going to have to take 2-bit music and break it for a few seconds, and now there's a gap. And I was like, saying, okay, so now we have to come up with something to fill the gap that it's not going to seem stupid. Okay, this has to make sense that there's a gap here. And it was fine. It's a constant process of coming up with musical solutions, isn't it?
Musical crossword puzzles is the way I always think of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can actually help the music. Like an edit might actually happen, and you go, "Oh, now I have to cut it off and this beat or this bar or whatever," and hold some. Like you were saying, and you actually, when you look through it again, you go, "Actually, I prefer that now." So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how much of it is essentially, as we've said, like it's a very collaborative process. Like I think everyone here would agree that like music in this context is kind of made by the fact that it's collaborative. Because if we were all to just sit in our little composy holes and do whatever, I think it would turn out worse stuff. And I'm just conscious of answering some of the questions getting your good selves to answer some of the questions here in the chat. There's one from Nathan Hochter here that I think is actually interesting. It brings us to something I wanted to talk about in terms of working as a composer in Ireland, because it's not exactly like, it's funny, we're not LA, so we don't have oversaturation, but at the same time, there's a lower number of composers working in Ireland than other places. From Nathan, hello, I have a quick question. As a composer who was working a full-time job, not in composition unfortunately, and trying to seek out projects for composing, if any of you were in this position, how did you manage to balance a full-time job and the film media composition projects before making it your full-time work?
I hope you can hear me okay.
It's occasionally a little bit stuttery, but we can hear you, I think.
Yes, all very stuttery. So I'll just talk a little bit and then I'll probably leave it if you can't hear me properly. But yeah, that's a real challenge about. I mean, I was working full time as an osteopath until about 2 years ago. So I think the thing is to try. I think for my job, it was more the fact that I could work a little bit my own hours. So that was the only way I could actually do it, to have the time to compose as well. But it does take time. It is possible, but I did notice obviously in the creative space for the project, they do seem to come a bit more. So it is a challenge. I guess it's not a really clear answer, but I definitely know the pain of working full time and trying to score films as well. So what happens is you just end up working a lot of the time, and then slowly, for my situation, is reducing my full-time job slowly as the music became more full-time. So I hope you can hear me there.
Who wants to jump in next?
I worked in post-production for years before I became full-time. So I was a dubbing engineer, so I would have mixed lots of different television shows back in the day. That was my background.
You were sort of, out of curiosity, Giles, before that, because that's funny, because you were kind of almost adjacent. Did you, at any point before, when you were working in post-production, was there a point where you were balancing that with a full-time job, or was it always just that's my gig?
I worked in the post-production facility for a few years, and I set up my own company to do that. So I was able to then kind of shift my focus. I mean, my focus was to become a full-time composer, but as Nathan is saying, you have to build it up over a long period of time. It takes years, studying and all the different parts. So it's a slow process.
Marathon.
You don't get there overnight.
Yeah.
That was my journey.
Jonathan or Kevin, were either of you ever baristas?
No, I had a much more odd and sort of Fight Club style job. I wrote the user manuals for software and hardware. So when you buy a Hoover and you get a book with it, I used to write those books.
Did you sneak curse words and stuff and anecdotes into them because no one reads them?
At any point I possibly could, yeah. So that was my it's a peculiar occupation, but yeah, I do remember there's a lot of times where I just have to stay up at night, maybe to get some music done and go into work. I don't think I'd be able for it now. It's
the young man's game.
I think so. They're going in for an 8 to half 5 job and then coming home and start composing all night. But yeah, I would like to resonate with what Giles is saying there. It just takes a long time, and then you might work with someone and you think they're very talented and they're bound to do a lot of more films, and then they never do. They just end up becoming a researcher or something. But eventually, one of these people that you work with ends up doing quite a lot of work, and then they come back if they're happy with what you did. They come back to you. So it does. I think time is the key there. Being able to keep at it.
Does anyone know who that quote is attributed to? I always forget, but it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. I can't remember for the life of me who it is. I often think of Stephen Price in that context, because again, like everyone is just like, oh, Gravity, Oscar, there he is, and you're like, and everyone was like, I knew he'd been a jobbing composer for years and working as a sound designer, but no one had heard of him, and then overnight. But again, he'd been doing it solidly for like 15 years at that point. Kevin, how about yourself?
Well, I'm not entirely sure if I've ever had a kind of what you describe a full-time job.
Yeah, a real job is what.
Although I did, I lived in Australia for 4 years. I think I worked in a bank over there for a couple of years and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I've pretty much always been a musician. Anyway, like gigging as a musician for definitely the last 20 years. Anyway, you know. So, and then just kind of fell into the composition end of things over the last 15, sort of 16 years, whatever. I was doing a bit. Sort of more sort of performance composition rather than actual film and stuff like that, and then just sort of like what the guys are saying, just sort of struck up a relationship with people and got into it that way, and you know, grabbing your opportunities when they arise and stuff like that. So
yeah, there was another question here, and I thought some of your good selves might be able to address it, because I certainly can't. It's a rare experience for me to have this be something, but it was just how difficult is it to incorporate original songs into your work and maintain the emotional drive of the piece. That's from John McGarrigle. Just wondering, could any of you speak to that? Because I did see, I thought, Natasha, that I saw that you, when you were doing The Hunger, I think there were some traditional pieces in it. Because like, even if you were to speak to that.
No, I hope you can hear me okay now.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, I think it was the ad blocker. Maybe. Yes, doing the original, I mean, for The Hunger, for original songs, I just got local musicians to do interpretations themselves of a couple of Irish pieces. I love working with other artists. I think that's a really cool thing. I mean, working with original songs, what I think is great is if you can make it your own, as in arrange it in your own voice as much as you can. But I love bringing in a soloist in, and then they add to it to make it something unique, I think. So that's how I like to work. It's like I help with the arrangement, but I really give free rein to the soloist to express it themselves.
It's grand. When we edit this video, we'll cut out all those moments where no one knows what to say.
Yeah, I think you could say the same. You could say the same for singers and people, soloists or other musicians playing stuff for you on recordings, and kind of improvising and things like that can be really exciting to change the whole energy of a piece of music. That it might be going off topic a bit, but it's a similar thing, integrating into the score or whatever.
just the second part of John's question to maintain the emotional drive of the piece. That's the kind of key in that whole question, really, because whatever you're scoring to is driving the emotional of what the emotion needs to come out of the music. So it's entirely dictated by the story that's being told, the narrative, the imagery, the whole thing. So if you do have original songs that work in that context, then fair enough. But if you're trying to shoehorn stuff in just for the sake of getting one of your tunes in, it's cut out straight away. So the main thing is that the integrity of the actual full project is sort of maintained, whether that incorporates an original song or not. So be it, like.
I'm just conscious that the two FNIers have made their way in, but Claire had asked in the chat just what we were speaking about earlier in terms of how early someone should get involved in the project. Does anyone want to recap that? Claire?
Yeah, I think the ideal thing is as early as possible in a project, and I think as we were discussing, I mean, obviously it's lovely to read a script. I mean, I know on short films often I've got to read the script. I've been in right from the very first meeting, and it's been very exciting then, because you can do a few sketches, or you can kind of even like talk about music and make playlists and kind of listen to stuff, and and then sometimes people might play music on the day of the shoot, and it might influence the energy and that type of thing. And then come back to the cut. And I mean, everything really happens in the edit, but you can do a lot of prep before you go into the edit. I suppose it all depends on the time constraints that you have.
Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, I just want to. Hello, everybody. I'm back.
Those pesky FNI guys.
Yeah, they're
coming to ruin your fun.
What are the two guys in the Muppets called again?
Yeah.
Guys in the balcony.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, that's us, all right. As you may know, we had Sarah on the podcast before, and I want to put it out just to the group about how do we eradicate music and sound becoming an afterthought in directors' minds. More often than not, particularly with kind of first-time directors or directors who find themselves in a position of power, all of a sudden don't. How can we improve the shorthand or change the communication in terms of thinking about scoring differently? Does anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I don't mind answering that. So I suppose, for filmmakers just to realize that, obviously bringing us in early, but also that having music that's nuanced to the narrative just brings the film on such a high level than just having, say, music library. And like Kevin talked about, there's continuity, there's nuance, and you can really be very subtle with the music and say a lot. And I think the filmmakers just to kind of think of how the music would affect the film while they may be at the script stage. How can they see it at that stage or hear it? Even if they give us ideas as composers, it's really helpful. But I mean, I think obviously as a composer, I think it's extremely valuable to have composed music in film because it just really can elevate a film to another level. So that's my 2 cents.
Brilliant.
And actually, I'd say there's one downfall, which is if you're, for a filmmaker starting out, they might decide to cut their film to some very well-known piece of music, and then that can be a terrible problem for a composer because the whole thing can work on that side of the rhythm or the feel or even the lyrics, and obviously to license a track like that is going to be very difficult. So it's just another thing to bear in mind is to resist that temptation to put in your the big track.
the Beatles back catalogue.
yeah exactly.
I think film schools in general should target that actual area. I'm not talking about film composers or anything. I'm actually talking about filmmakers, directors. Because as far as I'm aware, there's very little ever mentioned within film school about the role of music in film and really sort of studying what works and what doesn't work. And I mean, you could just name classic movies here all night, and every single one of them will have a killer score. And if you took that away, it just, as Natasha was saying, reduces the whole thing. Like take away the music of the film and reduce it to rubble nearly. So and a lot of filmmakers just don't seem to. I don't know if it's just that it's not taught in film school or it's not talked about really anyway. So that's what the Composers Guild is kind of about as well.
I suppose that's what this is a great kind of mediator, so a chat like this, so that it will be available for people to understand, particularly in our community and our network, to say, look, this is how it's interpreted from the other side. This is what you need to know. You need to kind of think outside the box and start thinking more about the practicalities of how to work. Some of the better directors know a little bit about everything, and they're wonderful jacks of all trades. And I think that any kind of transparency, to echo what I said in some of the other chats, where people are actually talking about these things, and you do have, it's idealistic as it sounds, but these subgroups where people are being transparent, and you can pick and choose through either our podcast, for example, or things like this, so you understand what it means to be a scenic artist, or what it means to be a sound mixer. Like, you know, just sound to some directors is all one big package, as opposed to 3 or 4 different jobs: a sound designer, sound mixer, and a composer, and production, recording, a set recording sound. You know, 3 or 4 different jobs. And the distinction, you know, it is that kind of filmmaking for dummies, and we need to do that. We need to show people the distinction between it and the roles that need to be respected and explained. You know, there is no kind of masterclass series of this is what the Irish film and TV equivalent of what you're consuming every day on Netflix is, you know. And by more people talking like this and going, no, that's bollocks, don't work that way, you need to do this, you know, and you need to talk to people, you need to find out more about what it is that I do in my job, so that you're not devaluing it by fucking, you know, going to, you know, stock music sites and tacking the tail on the donkey just to fucking get it over the line. And I'd ask all of you kind of the same question, if you don't mind answering. How should people approach composers? Should they email them straight out? Should they send scripts and go, I really love your work, and you'll engage with them that way? Or what's the best way to go about getting talented people to work with you and developing that shorthand from the very start? Because that's ultimately what this is about.
I would have said anything. You know, any sort of contact is. We're all here. As we said, I'm always here. I'm always in this. So it's an email or phone call, but it is absolutely, just to echo what everyone said. It's so often the music brings like real magic, and I'm not talking about what I do or something like that, but of the films that I love, you know, it is often such a key component of the magic of what makes that film a classic. And unfortunately, it's at the end of the process. And so that thing of, you know, the budget's practically gone, maybe all gone, and now we're at the very end, and now it's time for sound and music. I see somebody mentioned in the chat there about Halloween that I know he gets to do, he was able to do the music himself, but he put a lot of the budget towards the sound at the end of it. The sound of the music is so important for legitimizing certain parts of it, and then bringing the magic. And I think it gets some of that last thing on the list reputation, because it's actually at the end when everyone's done their part, and it's just before the festival date, and suddenly the music, but it just can transform things. It really can, you know. And just email, you know, contact any of us. We're all happy to chat about these things.
I mean, and let's be honest, you're going to be busy or tied up with something sometimes, but you know what you're guaranteed with good professional people is they'll decline respectfully, won't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe even recommend, they'll say, oh, get in touch with such and such, you know.
Yeah, which is probably more valuable sometimes, because it'll bring you down a different road, right?
Yeah, I think the filmmaker should have an idea of the kind of music they want, and they should really be looking at the directory or whatever, and listening to composers, and you know, trying to find the sound that they're looking for, because obviously no composer is the same either. So there is a lot of variety out there. Even in the Screen Composers Guild here in Ireland, there's massive variety of composers and different types of music.
Absolutely. I'm just going to stick the website on the right-hand side there. Check it out. Do reach out to the organizations. We've more guilds now in film and television than we've ever had before, which means that the people are available to us. The information is there. So there's no real excuse for not reaching out to find or to offer work. I mean, there's also the misconception that because someone's good, they're fucking booked out or they're busy, you know? So there should, the more transparency and brass-necked approach to working with people that happens, the better it is for all of us, you know. And if you keep at people, usually they'll end up working with you. Isn't that what's happened with all of you all the time? even if it's for free. And you know, the paid on the unpaid debate is a big thing that comes up with FNI all the time as well. Where do you all stand on unpaid work? I mean, if I mean, look, if it was a brilliant project, surely, and money wasn't a concern, you'd work on it for free. So what tips it one way or the other, and where do you stand with that type of thing?
I'll do it for a pint.
Well, you would have said that maybe 6 weeks ago when the pubs are closed.
I know. No, actually, there'll always be, you know, I'll say, listen, I'm not going to do it for free, but I'll do it for a pint. If it's say it's a short film or something, I'm really like, and I want to work with the person, all that sort of stuff, you know, I don't, you know, we make a deal about it as well, like, and it's like in a pub, like, you're going to buy me a pint, you know. So there's actually an investment that has to be made.
So there is a transaction. There has to be some sort of transaction, even if it's
and there's a bit of banter in the pub as well. It's great, you know.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say would be, because it's probably happened to all of us, is when someone says it's free or it's, you know, it's paid work, there has to be an understanding on their part that you're effectively the head of your own entire department, and that what they do or don't pay for will ultimately affect, like, your work ethic and all that aside, it will affect how the music sounds. It'll affect whether you have performers or not. All these little small things that, again, I know most filmmakers don't think about that. Paul just asked in the chat, and I think it's something that I often think of when people ask about when should composers start working on a project. He said, I'm a writer-director and just wondering, would you all prefer working off a script first or having the edit to work around? I'd say that there's very little harm to be done by having a composer on board from an extremely early point, because they don't necessarily need to be trying to really, like, literally score the whole thing. They can just be tipping away at ideas and building that. I think was it Natasha and I think Jonathan both referred to it, like this kind of like building a vocabulary and an understanding with the director, but also you're building a sort of a musical identity for the film. You mightn't use any of the musical material, but it's all taken over. So I don't think there's any harm in even having someone on board at that point, because, you know, it all snowballs. Whereas more often than not, people come on board right at the end. Even in FNI, you often find people don't seek out composers so much as just advertise, I need a composer. And if you're not actively seeking out a type of music, it speaks to maybe that you're not quite sure as to what kind of music you want. Whereas, you know, the Guild is an indisposable resource. Check out the site, listen to all the samples, and then suddenly you've got a wealth of stuff that is way better than you putting on the best of Hans Zimmer on Spotify, because you're not getting him, like.
Yeah, again, it's about advertising, and, you know, even having the website there in place is invaluable. You know, I mean, how old is the Guild now? About 2 years old?
I think it's 3
Established
at this
in
point. Is it?
2018, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, more of this and more showcases of work of what's actually available and who's available to do it is more beneficial. I mean, I know very actively, as I'm starting my journey to direct properly now, I'm much more interested in kind of seeking out who's available and who are the talented people, and not being led by what's cool or, you know, someone who sounds like someone else, you know. So it's great to have all of these guilds to, you know, around to go, right, well, this is the best of what we have. Stop looking overseas with the greatest of respect to the great work other people do, and start where you're supposed to start, and be respectful to other people's positions within the industry. Do you want to go home and go to bed and have drinks or whatever it is you did, or watch the end of the Late Late at the last 7 minutes of the Late Late? Thanks so much for your time. It is important that people do events like this. It is important that people know who the voices and the faces are behind the roles, and that people are kind and giving with their time, you know, so that people know, yeah, I'm available for work, but yeah, look, this is what I do. If you didn't know, I'm quite willing to educate you on that, so that we all have a better understanding about, you know, the industry as a whole. So thanks very much to Mr. O'Connor for hosting, and thanks. Sorry I wasn't here for most of it, but I'll rewatch it as well afterwards, because I too I'm very curious to find out more about all of you guys. Thanks for supporting FNI and thanks for coming on tonight. And yeah, if there's anything that we can do in terms of getting anything you guys are doing out there to our community, let me know and I'll do my best to try and accommodate you. Okay. Hang around for the networking because you might get a bit of work out of it, frankly. There is a few people still around. If you can spare another 10 or 15 minutes, it would be great. Thanks everybody who's still on. I know it's late, but hopefully now this will be the last online event that we'll do fully online for the rest of our lives. Hopefully. But no. But we'll do some in-person stuff in the future. And thanks so much again. Pat, do you want to wrap it up there?
Yeah, no, just thanks, Paul, and thanks, Kevin, Jonathan, Giles, and Natasha. Again, folks, check out Screen Composers Guild of Ireland. I think it's in there, screencomposersguild.ie, to find out all the lovely things about all the lovely people on the call. And hire your composers early. Don't change your cut.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care. Good night. I'll make this available afterwards as well if everyone's okay with that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Who's going to the networking?
I am.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
What do we do? We just you just pop in.
Pop in. You get randomly selected with somebody else that has attended the event, like anyone who's attended, and you have 3 minutes to chat. If you don't want to chat to them, you just hit the next button and hang up on them. If you like them, you can press connect, and then after the event, it will exchange your details in the Hopin platform, or I think something like that. So it's pretty good. It's fun, and there's a good few people on it there now. So
great. Thanks.
Do they know if you reject it?
Oh yeah. Or you could just say, "Oh, my internet connection."
Yeah,
yeah, just freeze like Zoom calls. Thanks again, Giles. It was great. Great having you on there. Appreciate it.
No worries. Have a good
night. Chat to you later. Cheers.
Bye.
And everyone else who's still in the chat, there's a couple of people still here. In this session, if you just click the networking button on the far left there, you will then have an option to join a randomly selected attendee for a chat. It's only a 3-minute chat, and then you can move on to the next person. So thanks, and see you in there.